Hello, and welcome back to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. Tonight's journey is 2 hours of slow, unsettling horror stories, created to help you relax, unwind, and drift into the darkness. There will be only 2 or 3 ads during the first 10 minutes. After that, you can enjoy the rest of the video without interruption. If you enjoy calm, atmospheric horror and sleep-friendly storytelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Now, get comfortable, let your body become completely still, and allow the sounds of the outside world to slowly fade into silence. Tonight, the shadows are waiting, and beyond them, a forgotten story begins. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself descend into Umbral Dread. Let's begin. Story 1, I want to share an experience that happened to me when I was a child. English is not my first language, so I hope everything is easy to understand. I know some people may not believe this story, and that is completely fine. I am not trying to convince anyone. I only want to tell people about one of the strangest and most frightening things that ever happened to me. I first shared a shorter version of this story in the comment section of a scary story video by @AudaseatEI. Her video encouraged me to finally talk about what happened. Even after all these years, I can still remember many parts of that experience clearly. Whenever I think about it, I feel the same cold fear I felt when I was young. When I was in 4th grade, my family rented a small house near the sea. The weather in that area was usually cold and windy, especially at night. Before we moved in, some people told us that families who rented the house never stayed there for very long. They always left after a few months or a year. No one gave us a clear reason. Some said the place was uncomfortable. Others said people often became sick while living there. My parents did not take those stories seriously. The house was affordable, close to the places we needed to go, and large enough for our family. We thought the previous tenants probably moved away because of ordinary problems. Maybe the house was too cold, or maybe the sound of the sea made it difficult to sleep. We moved in anyway. The house was small and simple. When you entered through the front door, the living room was on the left side and the kitchen was on the right. A narrow hallway led to 3 bedrooms. My parents, my younger sister, and I all slept in the largest bedroom. Our helper slept in another room, while the 3rd room was mostly used for storage. From the beginning, the largest bedroom and our helper's room felt different from the rest of the house. It was difficult to explain. During the day, they looked normal. There were beds, cabinets, windows, and ordinary furniture. But at night, the rooms felt heavy and uncomfortable. Sometimes it felt as though someone was standing in the corner, watching us. The room where my family slept had a door that opened onto a balcony. The balcony had no rails around it. It was simply a flat concrete area outside the room, high enough that someone could be badly injured if they fell. This was especially dangerous for me because I used to sleepwalk. My parents were always worried that I might open the balcony door while asleep and walk outside. They usually locked it before going to bed, but during the daytime, we sometimes opened it to let fresh air into the room. Since the house was close to the sea, strong wind often blew through the balcony door. Even when the sun was shining, I never liked standing on that balcony. The air there always felt colder than it should have. Sometimes I felt as though something was behind me, even when I knew I was alone. After we had lived in the house for a few months, my family began getting sick again and again. At first, We thought it was because of the cold weather. The sea air was strong, and the house was often damp. However, our illnesses did not feel normal. One person would recover, and then another person would become sick. Sometimes all of us felt weak at the same time. My mother suddenly developed painful sores around her lips and mouth. They became so bad that she could hardly eat. Every time she tried to move her lips, the sores hurt. There was no clear reason why they appeared. She had never experienced anything like that before. I developed a cough that refused to go away. It continued for weeks. Sometimes it became so strong that I could not sleep. My sister also became sick often, and we missed many days of school. It felt like a cycle that never ended. We would recover for a few days, and then the sickness would return. My mother was a doctor, so she knew how to take care of us. She gave us medicine, checked our temperatures, and made sure we rested. Still, she could not explain why we kept becoming ill. As time passed, the uncomfortable feeling inside the house became stronger. At night, we often heard scratching and running above the ceiling. We assumed rats were living there, but sometimes the sounds seemed much heavier than rats. It sounded like something large was moving from one side of the house to the other. There were also moments when we heard soft noises in the hallway. They sounded like footsteps, but whenever someone opened the bedroom door, the hallway was empty. By the time I was in 5th grade, my parents had decided that we needed to leave. They were already building our own house on another side of town, so we planned to move as soon as it was ready. Strangely, the moment we seriously began talking about leaving, the rented house seemed to become worse. A terrible termite infestation appeared. Black termites began coming out of the ceiling. Sometimes they dropped onto the floor without warning. We found them around the walls, near the doors, and even close to our beds. The rats in the ceiling became louder, too. At night, they ran above us so violently that the ceiling seemed to shake. It sounded as though they were being chased by something. My parents tried to solve the problems, but nothing worked for long. The house felt as though it was falling apart around us. One day, my family planned a trip to visit the land where our new home was being built. An old wooden house was still standing on the property. It was empty and would eventually need to be removed. My father walked around the land and measured the lot. My mother, my younger sister, and I entered the old wooden house. There was almost nothing inside. The rooms were dusty, and the wooden floor made loud cracking sounds beneath our feet. The air smelled old and dry. Sunlight entered through small spaces in the walls, creating thin lines of light in the darkness. The only object we found inside was a portrait of Jesus Christ. It was strange because the entire house was empty except for that portrait. There were no chairs, tables, boxes, clothes, or other decorations. The picture was simply there by itself. I stood in front of it and stared at the face of Jesus for a long time. I did not understand why, but I felt uncomfortable. The picture was supposed to make me feel safe, yet the silence inside the old house made it feel frightening. After my father finished measuring the land, we returned to the rented house near the sea. Not long after we arrived, I developed a high fever. It came suddenly. One moment I felt normal, and the next I was weak, dizzy, and burning hot. My mother took me into our bedroom and placed me on the bed. Because the room felt warm and I needed fresh air, she opened the balcony door. A cold sea wind entered the room. The curtains moved back and forth, and the air smelled like salt water. I remember staring toward the open balcony. Even though I had a fever, I felt a different kind of cold coming from outside. It was the same uncomfortable feeling I had always felt around that area. My mother stayed beside me and took care of me. Since she was a doctor, she connected me to an intravenous fluid line. This was not unusual in our family. When one of us became badly dehydrated or sick, she knew what to do. After some time, I became too tired to keep my eyes open. I slowly fell asleep. That was when I had the most frightening dream of my life. In the dream, everything around me was completely black. There were no walls, no floor, and no sky. It felt as though I was standing in an endless, empty space. A single light shone from somewhere above me. I was standing under it alone. Then I realized I was not truly alone. There were people around me, standing just outside the light. At first, I could only see their shapes. Slowly, they moved closer, and I began to recognize some of their faces. They were dead relatives. Some of them were people I had only seen in family photographs. Others were people I remembered from when they were alive. Their faces looked pale and empty, but they did not appear angry. Two people stood closer to me than the others. One was my grandmother, who was actually my grandfather's sister. The other was my uncle, who had passed away recently. My grandmother looked directly at me. Then she slowly reached both of her hands toward me. She did not speak, but I understood what she wanted. She wanted me to go with them. For some reason, I was not afraid at first. I reached my hands toward her. I felt myself moving closer to the darkness where my dead relatives were waiting. Just before I could touch her, my mother suddenly appeared behind me. She wrapped her arms around my body and pulled me backward. She held me tightly, refusing to let me go. My mother was crying. She kept pulling me away from my grandmother while my grandmother continued reaching toward me. I began crying too. The darkness seemed to move closer, and the people around us began disappearing into it. Then I woke up. My mother was holding me in the same way she had held me in the dream. She was crying, and I was crying too. For several seconds, I could not understand where I was. I still felt as though my dead relatives were standing nearby. I looked around the bedroom, expecting to see them in the corners. My mother told me that I had been having a bad dream. She also said that I had tried to get out of bed while asleep. Because I was known to sleepwalk, she had grabbed me before I could move too far. I told her about the dream. I told her that my dead relatives were calling me and that she had stopped me from going with them. She tried to calm me down, but I could see that she was frightened. My fever became worse after that. I felt exhausted, and within a few minutes, I fell asleep again. I do not remember what happened next. When I opened my eyes again, my mother was carrying me out of the house. My father, younger sister, grandparents, and our helper were all running outside with us. Some of them were crying. Everyone looked terrified. The sunlight hurt my eyes, and I felt weak and confused. I did not understand why we were suddenly leaving the house. When my family saw that I was awake, they looked deeply relieved. My mother held me tighter. Everyone began speaking at the same time, asking if I was all right. I told them that I did not know what had happened. That was when they explained what they had experienced while I was asleep. After I fell asleep for the second time, my mother went to the kitchen to prepare food for me. My younger sister stayed in the bedroom to watch over me. For a while, I slept quietly. Then, I suddenly began screaming. My sister said it was not a normal scream. It was louder and more frightening than anything she had ever heard from me. She became terrified and ran to call my mother. My mother rushed into the room and tried to wake me, but I did not respond. I continued screaming with my eyes closed. She called my father, our helper, and my grandparents. All of them entered the room and tried to hold me down. According to them, I was moving with unbelievable strength. I was only a child, but several adults had difficulty controlling me. My mother placed a small pocket Bible on my clothes. We are Filipino, and my family is religious, so they believed that prayer and holy objects might protect me. The moment the Bible touched me, I became even more violent. They said I tried to push it away while continuing to scream. My body twisted, and my hands moved wildly. My family prayed while holding me down. The neighbors lived very close to our house. One house was only around 6 feet behind ours. More houses stood beside it, so my family believed someone would hear the screaming and come to help. My grandmother ran outside and shouted for the neighbors. However, when she stepped outside, everything was silent. She could not see anyone. The area around the house appeared empty, even though people usually sat outside and talked during that time of day. She screamed for help again and again, but no one answered. Inside the bedroom, I continued struggling. My family had a small piece of jewelry with an image of Jesus Christ on it. They tried to place it around my wrist, but I fought them with so much strength that they could not do it. While I screamed, I began shouting words in our language. I cried, "God, help me. Please help me. There is a hole. There is a hole in the ground." I repeated the words again and again. My family did not understand what hole I was talking about. There was no hole inside the bedroom. Still, I shouted as though I was standing near one and was about to fall into it. Eventually, several family members managed to place the religious jewelry around my wrist. The moment they put it on me, I became calm. My body stopped fighting. My screaming ended, and I became quiet. My mother quickly picked me up and carried me outside. The rest of my family followed her. That was when I woke up in her arms. Later, a priest came to the house. My family told him everything that had happened, including the words I had screamed about a hole. According to him, there was an abandoned house in the area that had a dark and frightening history. Inside that house was a strange hole in the ground. People believed disturbing things had happened there. The hole had eventually been covered. I had never seen that hole. At least, I did not remember seeing it. I did not understand how I could have known about it or why I screamed about it while I was unconscious. After the incident, our helper looked closely at my fingers. She asked, "Is it still there?" I did not understand what she meant, so I asked her what she was looking for. She said that while I was screaming, there had been something black on my fingers. She never clearly explained what it was. I do not know whether it looked like dirt, a stain, a shadow, or something else. I only remember the fear on her face when she examined my hands. There were other strange things about the house and the land around it. Near the sea, there was a large tree. A rope hung from one of its branches. We were told that a man had ended his life there before our family moved into the area. The rope was still hanging from the tree. As a child, I did not fully understand how disturbing that was. I sometimes looked at the rope without thinking much about it. Now, when I remember it, I cannot understand why no one removed it. There was also a dark river beside our house. I often played near it because I was a curious and careless child. I had ADHD and did not always understand when a place was dangerous. The river looked especially frightening in the evening. The water became almost black, and the plants around it moved whenever the wind came from the sea. Sometimes I wonder whether something connected all those places. The house, the balcony, the river, the old tree, and the abandoned building with the covered hole. My family moved out of the rented house soon after the incident. Once we left, our health slowly improved. My cough disappeared. My mother's painful sores healed, and the cycle of sickness finally stopped. Another family moved into the house after us. They did not stay for long either. Their son became sick almost every day. Eventually, they decided to leave, just like the families before them. The strangest part is that the real owners of the house later moved into it themselves. They still live there, and according to what we heard, they have not experienced anything paranormal. They do not become sick constantly, and they have not reported screaming, nightmares, or strange activity. This made my family wonder whether the spirit in the house could have been a relative of the owners. Maybe it did not want strangers living there. Maybe it only allowed members of its own family to stay. I do not know whether that explanation is true. I only know what happened to us. There is one final detail that still frightens me more than almost anything else. After I woke up and my family carried me outside, the neighbors began appearing again. They were nearby, talking and spending time together as they normally did. My grandmother asked them why they had ignored her screams. The neighbors looked confused. They said they had never heard her. They had been outside the entire time. They were only a short distance away from our house. Yet they claimed that the house had been completely quiet. They did not hear me screaming. They did not hear my mother, father, grandparents, sister, or helper shouting. They did not hear my grandmother calling for help from outside. From their point of view, nothing unusual had happened. My grandmother knew how loudly she had screamed. Our houses were so close that the neighbors should have heard even an ordinary conversation. There was no reasonable way they could have missed the sounds coming from our home. For those few terrifying minutes, it was as though our house had been separated from the rest of the neighborhood. My grandmother later said that when she ran outside, the place did not feel normal. The silence was too deep. It felt like the entire world had disappeared, leaving only our family and the house behind. Then, after the religious jewelry was placed on my wrist and I became calm, everything returned. People appeared again. Voices could be heard. The neighborhood looked normal. I still do not know exactly what happened that day. Maybe I was only very sick and having a terrible fever dream. Maybe my family panicked and remembered some details differently. Perhaps there is a normal explanation for everything. But those explanations do not answer all my questions. They do not explain why several adults could barely control the strength of a sick child. They do not explain the black marks on my fingers. They do not explain how I knew about a covered hole in an abandoned house. Most of all, they do not explain why the neighbors heard absolutely nothing, while my entire family screamed for help only a few feet away. Years have passed since we lived in that house near the sea. I am older now, but I still remember the dark dream, my dead relatives reaching toward me, and my mother pulling me back. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she had not appeared in the dream. Would I have taken my grandmother's hands? Would I have followed my relatives into the darkness? I try not to think about it too often. Still, whenever I remember the cold wind coming through the balcony door, the sound of rats running in the ceiling, the rope hanging from the tree, and the black river beside the house, I feel chills moving across my skin. I do not know what lived in that house. I only know that it did not want us there. Story 2. You're not leaving this facility, the man said. I already told you. You are going to die here. The painter stared at him from the other side of the thick glass wall. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying, and his hands would not stop shaking. I'm sorry you can't see your family again, the man continued, but you need to understand how serious this is. You may have already caused the end of our world. You should consider yourself lucky that I haven't approved a vivisection. The painter slowly raised his head. A what? A vivisection. What the hell does that mean? It means studying a living body through surgery. The painter jumped out of his chair so quickly that it fell backward and struck the floor. You want to cut me open while I'm still alive? I said I haven't authorized it. What the fuck are you talking about? The painter shouted. I told you I had a stroke. Something happened to my brain. I need medical help. I need a brain scan, an MRI, surgery, medication, anything. I need a real doctor, not some government psychopath threatening to cut me apart. The man on the other side of the glass did not react. He was perhaps 50 years old, with short gray hair and dark circles under his eyes. His white protective suit covered him from his neck to his shoes. A clear mask hid most of his face, and a breathing tube ran from the mask to a small tank on his back. Behind him stood 2 soldiers holding rifles. The painter looked around the sealed room again. The walls were made of smooth white panels. There were no windows except for the thick observation glass. Air entered through a metal vent in the ceiling and escaped through another vent near the floor. The room contained a bed, a steel toilet, a small table, and the chair he had just knocked over. Everything smelled of chemicals. Even that smell seemed wrong. The disinfectant smelled sweet, almost like burnt sugar. The plastic mattress smelled like wet stone. The water they had given him smelled of nothing, but it tasted sharp and metallic. He pressed both hands against his temples. My head hurts, he said. Please, I have a wife. I have a daughter. They must be terrified. Just let me call them. The man looked down at the tablet in his hand. Walk me through the events again. The painter stared at him. I already told you. Tell me again. I fell at work and hit my head. Again, the man said sharply. In order, in exact detail. Tell me everything you saw, touched, smelled, tasted, and heard. Do not leave anything out. I've told this story 6 times. Tell it a 7th time. The painter kicked the fallen chair across the floor. It scraped loudly against the white tiles. Why? Because something you consider unimportant may be the only thing that saves billions of people. The painter stopped moving. The anger remained on his face, but fear slowly rose beneath it. Billions? Start from the beginning. The painter breathed heavily for several seconds. Then he picked up the chair and sat down. Okay, he said. Fine, my name is Daniel Mercer. I'm a painter. That's all I am. I paint houses, offices, stores, whatever pays. I work for Jackson and Company. We got a large job at an old manor in Druid Hills. What was the address? I already gave it to you people. Say it again. Daniel gave him the address. The man entered it into his tablet. Continue. The house belonged to an old man named Arthur Bell. At least, I think that was his name. He was strange. Not dangerous, just strange. He followed us around during the first day and kept telling us not to touch anything. What exactly did he say? Daniel closed his eyes, trying to remember. He said, paint around what you can, cover what you can't. Nothing leaves its place. Something like that. Did he explain why? No. My boss asked if we could move the furniture away from the walls, but the old man refused. He said we could put plastic sheets over everything, but couldn't carry anything out of the rooms. What kind of furniture? Old stuff. Heavy wooden tables. Cabinets, chairs that looked like they belonged in a museum. Paintings of dead relatives, clocks, statues, a lot of mirrors. The man behind the glass looked up. How many mirrors? I don't know. A dozen, maybe more. Some were covered with cloth. Some weren't. Did Mr. Bell say anything about the mirrors? Daniel hesitated. He told us not to clean them. His exact words? Daniel rubbed his forehead. He said, "Leave the glass as it is. Dust is safer than curiosity." The man behind the glass became very still. You didn't mention that before. I forgot. I thought it was just something weird old people say. Continue, we were painting the main sitting room. It had a high ceiling with decorative trim. My boss wanted the ceiling finished before lunch. I had an extension pole, but it wasn't reaching the corner properly, so I climbed higher on the ladder. How high? Maybe 12 feet. 14 at most. Was anyone holding the ladder? No, why not? Because we were behind schedule and everyone was busy. Daniel looked toward the soldiers. Are you going to arrest me for breaking safety rules now? Continue. I was rolling paint across the ceiling. The ladder moved. Maybe one of the legs slipped on the plastic sheet. I tried to grab the trim, but my hand was covered in paint. I lost my balance and fell backward. Onto the mirror. Yes, describe it. Daniel swallowed. It was tall, taller than me, maybe 7 feet. It had a black wooden frame with little carvings in it. Leaves, snakes, flowers, I don't know. It was leaning against the wall because the old man wouldn't let us move it. Was it covered? Most of it was covered with a white sheet. The sheet slipped off when I fell. What did you see? Myself? Only yourself? Daniel frowned. For a second, I thought my reflection moved before I did. The man leaned closer to the glass. What do you mean? I don't know. It happened too fast. I was falling. I saw myself in the mirror, but the reflection seemed to be standing straight. It looked like it was watching me fall. And then I hit the glass. Did it break? No, I don't understand how. I'm over 200 pounds. I landed shoulder first against it, and my head hit near the center. The whole frame fell flat under me, but the glass didn't crack. Did you lose consciousness? Maybe for a second. What do you remember? Daniel looked down at his hands. I remember cold. How cold? Like falling into ice water. It wasn't only on my skin. It felt like the cold passed through my body, through my chest, my bones, my eyes. Then I heard something. What? Breaking glass. But the mirror did not break. No. Did the others hear it? I don't know. What happened when you opened your eyes? The crew was standing around me. My boss, Frank, was shouting my name. Someone helped me sit up. Did they look normal? Daniel's face tightened. No, explain. They looked wrong. How? I can't explain it properly. At first, I thought my vision was blurry. Their faces looked familiar, but something was different. Frank has a scar on his right cheek from a motorcycle accident, but I saw it on his left. The man behind the glass glanced toward one of the soldiers. Anything else? One of the guys, Luis, has his company logo printed on the front of his shirt. I couldn't read it. The letters looked backward. I thought I had damaged my brain. Did anyone touch you? Yes. Frank held my shoulders. Luis checked the back of my head. Another guy gave me a bottle of water. Did you bleed? A little. There was blood on my hair. Did your blood touch anyone? Daniel's breathing changed. I don't know. Think. Frank wiped my head with a cloth. Maybe some blood got on his gloves. Were the gloves thrown away? How should I know? The man quickly typed something into his tablet. Daniel stood up again. What happened to Frank? We are discussing what happened to you. No, you asked if my blood touched him. What happened to him? The man did not answer. Daniel stepped toward the glass. What happened to my crew? They are in quarantine. Are they alive? For now. Daniel pressed a hand against the glass. You said I might have ended the world. Tell me what happened to them. Finish your account. Daniel looked as if he wanted to strike the glass, but he slowly returned to his chair. I felt sick, he said quietly. The room spun around me. Everyone's face looked wrong. Not completely different, but changed. Familiar in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. He took a breath. Then I threw up. Where? On the plastic sheet. Did anyone clean it? Luis did. Did he wear protective equipment? He had work gloves. Not medical gloves? No, the man typed again. My boss thought I had a concussion. Daniel continued. He told me to go home. They called a ride for me because they didn't want me driving. Did you touch the car? Of course I touched the car. Where? The door handle. The seat belt. The seat. I probably touched my phone too. Did you speak to the driver? A little. He asked if I was okay. Did you cough, sneeze, or vomit in the car? No. Did you bleed? I don't think so. What happened when you reached home? Daniel looked exhausted now. My wife was at work. My daughter, Emma, was home from college. She asked why I was back so early. I told her I fell. She said I should go to the hospital, but I didn't want to. I thought I could rest. What did you touch in the house? Daniel laughed bitterly. Everything. The front door, the couch, the kitchen counter, the bathroom sink. Do you want a full list of every object in my home? Yes, Daniel's laughter stopped. The man waited. I went to the kitchen, Daniel said. I wanted something cold to drink. I opened the fridge and took out orange juice. What was wrong with it? It smelled like paint thinner, like turpentine. Did you drink it? I took one sip and spat it into the sink. What else did you try? Cheese. It smelled bitter. Bitter is a taste. I know that. I'm telling you it smelled bitter. I don't know how else to describe it. The bread smelled like spearmint. Peanut butter smelled like smoke. Coffee smelled like vinegar. Everything was wrong. Did you eat anything? No, I couldn't. Did your daughter eat or drink after touching you or anything you touched? Daniel covered his face. I hugged her when I came inside. The man closed his eyes for a moment. Daniel lowered his hands. Where is she? She is under observation. And my wife? Also under observation. Are they showing symptoms? I'm not permitted to discuss that. You're not permitted? Daniel shouted. They're my family. You are also the possible source of an extinction-level biological event. Daniel stopped. The words seemed to take the strength out of him. He sank back into the chair. After the food smelled wrong, I tried to read the label on the juice bottle, he said. I couldn't. Every word looked backward. I checked my phone. Same thing. I thought the screen had changed, but Emma could read it. What about numbers? Backward, too. Did your own handwriting appear backward? I wrote my name on a piece of paper. It looked normal while I was writing it, but Emma said I had written it backward. The man nodded. What happened next? I panicked. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Emma called emergency services. The ambulance came. The paramedics thought I had a stroke. Did they touch you? Yes. Did they use needles? Yes, they put an IV in my arm. Was there bleeding? A little. Did your blood enter the IV line? I don't know. Did they remove the needle after arriving at the hospital? Yes. Where was it discarded? How am I supposed to know? The man said nothing. Daniel stared at him with growing horror. At the hospital, a doctor checked my eyes and made me smile and lift my arms. Daniel continued. He asked me questions. They took blood. He said they were going to send me for a scan. What changed? He received a phone call. Did you hear the conversation? Only part of it. He said, run it again. Then he said, that isn't possible. He looked at me like I had turned into some kind of animal. What happened after the call? He left the room. A nurse came in and removed the IV bag without touching me directly. Then everyone disappeared. For how long? Almost an hour. I kept shouting for help, but nobody came near the door. And then, people in protective suits came in. They gave me pills and an inhaler. They put some kind of clear hood over my head. Then they moved me into another ambulance. Did they explain anything? No. They brought me here. Daniel pointed toward the sealed door. And now you are telling me I'm going to die. The man behind the glass stared at the tablet for several seconds. Your name is Dr. Hale, right? Daniel asked. That's what one of the guards called you. Yes. Then act like a doctor. Tell me what is happening. Dr. Hale removed his glasses beneath the clear mask and rubbed his eyes. The first laboratory believed your blood samples had been contaminated, he said. The second laboratory believed their machines were malfunctioning. The third laboratory contacted us. Why? Because your lab results definitively show reversed chirality. Daniel stared at him. I don't know what that means. Most people don't. Then explain it. Dr. Hale placed the tablet on a metal cart beside him. Organic molecules can exist in forms that are almost identical, but face opposite directions. Imagine your left hand and your right hand. They have the same parts, but you cannot place one perfectly over the other. One is a mirror image of the other. Daniel slowly looked at his hands. Life on Earth uses particular molecular directions, Dr. Hale continued. Proteins, sugars, enzymes, amino acids, and many other substances have fixed orientations. Our bodies developed around those orientations over billions of years. So your body no longer follows them. Daniel looked up. Your cells are structured in the opposite direction. The proteins in your blood are mirrored. Your enzymes are mirrored. Your DNA has a mirrored structure. Every chiral molecule we have tested inside your body is reversed. Daniel shook his head. That's impossible. Yes, Dr. Hale said, it is. I hit my head. That's all. You did not suffer a stroke. Then why can't I read? You can read. The writing in this world simply faces the opposite direction from the writing your brain expects. My brain expects? Your entire nervous system has been reversed. As far as your mind is concerned, this room is the reflection. Daniel looked toward the observation glass. For a moment, he seemed to study Dr. Hale as though the doctor might only be an image. So I'm backward? No, Doctor, Hale said. From your perspective, we are backward. Daniel laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Does that mean I have to carry a mirror around for the rest of my life? No. Can it be fixed? No. Am I sick? No, Daniel stared at him. You just told me I'm going to die. You are not sick in the normal sense. You are biologically incompatible with this world. I'm breathing. Oxygen is not chiral. Neither is water. You can breathe, drink, and remain alive for a while. And food? You can chew it. You can swallow it. Your stomach can hold it. But your enzymes cannot properly interact with most of its nutrients. Daniel remembered the orange juice and the strange smell of cheese. So my body can't use food? Not normal food. What about sugar? The common sugars in our world are the wrong orientation for your body. Protein? Wrong orientation. Vitamins? Most of them are useless or harmful to you. Fats? Largely incompatible. Daniel's face slowly emptied of expression. You are effectively alien life, Doctor, Hale said. You are made of the same types of atoms. But your molecular machinery runs in the opposite direction. Your cells cannot interact normally with ours. Daniel looked down at his stomach. So I'll starve. Yes, how long? We don't know. A few weeks, perhaps. Your body can use whatever energy remained inside it when the change occurred. But after that, Dr. Hale did not finish. Daniel began to cry. At first, he did it silently. Tears ran down his cheeks as he stared at the floor. Then his shoulders started shaking. I have a daughter, he whispered. She's 20 years old. She still calls me when she doesn't know how to cook something. My wife and I have been married for 23 years. Dr. Hale turned his face away. Please, Daniel said, let me see them through the glass. That is not possible. I don't need to touch them. No, let me talk to them on the phone. We can arrange a recorded message after the contamination risk has been evaluated. A recorded message? Yes, you expect me to say goodbye through a recording? Dr. Hale remained silent. Daniel wiped his face with his sleeve. You said I can't get sick. Most ordinary viruses and bacteria cannot interact with your cells in the usual way. That sounds like a good thing. It isn't. Why? Some bacteria can still live on and inside your body. They do not need to infect your cells directly. They only need moisture, warmth, and nutrients. Daniel looked confused. Dr. Hale continued, we are giving you strong antibiotics to control our bacteria. Without them, ordinary organisms might grow inside your lungs, mouth, and digestive system. They would not infect you in the normal way, but they could physically fill spaces, create toxins, or block your airways. Daniel touched his throat. You said I was taking antibiotics. Yes. Antibiotics designed for normal bacteria. Then what is the problem? Your body did not cross alone. Daniel slowly lowered his hand. What does that mean? The samples taken from your mouth and digestive system contain microorganisms with the same reversed chirality as your body. Daniel stared at him. They are bacteria from your world, Dr. Hale said, or from whatever side of the mirror you came from. Daniel stood so quickly that the chair fell over again. My world? We believe the mirror may have exchanged you with your reflection. That's insane. I agree. My reflection isn't a person. Under normal conditions, no, there is no other world inside a mirror. Then explain your blood. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. Dr. Hale picked up his tablet again. Reversed bacteria would have no natural predators here, he said. Our viruses may not recognize them. Our immune systems may not recognize them. Most of our antibiotics may be useless against them. But you said they can't interact with your cells. They may not need to. They can grow on skin, in water, in soil, in food, inside animals, and across physical surfaces. Their only limits may be space and available nutrients. Daniel's eyes widened. The vomit. Yes, the cloth Frank used on my head. Yes, the ambulance. Yes, my house. Yes, my daughter. Dr. Hale did not answer. Daniel moved toward the glass until his face was inches from it. Is she infected? We don't know. Tell me. We have detected unusual microbial growth in several samples taken from the manor. Daniel stepped backward. At the house? Yes, how far has it spread? We don't know. How long before you know? We may never know. Dr. Hale's voice remained controlled, but fear had entered his eyes. We have ordered the evacuation and quarantine of the surrounding region. Roads have been closed. Air traffic has been redirected. The manor, the hospital, your home, and the vehicles involved are sealed. Then, burn them. It may not be enough. Use bleach. We do not know whether our disinfectants can affect mirrored organisms. Use fire. Heat should destroy them, but we cannot burn an entire city. We also do not know where every contaminated particle has traveled. Daniel thought of Frank's gloves, Luis cleaning the vomit, the rideshare driver touching the door, the paramedics moving equipment, nurses carrying blood samples, air vents in the hospital. Every movement had created another path. You said I might have ended the world, Daniel whispered. Yes. Daniel lowered himself onto the bed. For a long time, neither man spoke. Then, a door opened behind Dr. Hale. Several workers entered the observation room. All wore heavy protective suits. Between them, they carried a tall object wrapped in layers of clear plastic. Daniel immediately recognized its shape. No, he whispered. The workers placed it upright in front of the observation glass. Dr. Hale turned toward them. Is that the original frame? One worker nodded. Recovered from the manor, he said through his respirator. The surface was sealed before transport. No visible damage. Remove the outer covering, Doctor, Hale ordered. The workers carefully cut through the plastic. A black wooden frame appeared beneath it. Carved leaves twisted around carved snakes. Small wooden flowers filled the gaps between them. Daniel's skin became cold. That's it, he said. That's the mirror. They removed the final sheet. Daniel expected to see himself. Instead, he saw the room behind him. The reflection looked completely normal. His face appeared tired and pale. The scar above his eyebrow was on the side where he remembered it. The letters on Dr. Hale's identification badge were readable in the reflected image. Daniel approached the glass wall. Everything looks normal in it. Dr. Hale stepped closer to the mirror. To you. Daniel looked at his reflection. It moved exactly when he moved. He raised his right hand. The reflection raised what appeared to be its left. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Daniel thought he saw the reflection smile. He had not smiled. Daniel quickly lowered his hand. What was that? What did you see? Dr. Hale asked. My reflection moved. You moved. No, it smiled. The workers stepped away from the mirror. Dr. Hale stared at the glass. We cannot be certain that it is only a reflection, he said. Daniel looked at him. You really believe there is another world? I believe something impossible happened at the manor. The mirror is the only object connected to that event. What happens if I go through it? You may return to the place you came from. May? You may also die instantly. Daniel laughed weakly. I'm dying anyway. Dr. Hale looked toward the workers. One of them opened a small metal case and removed a sealed glass vial filled with clear liquid. Doctor, Hale took the vial carefully. We have prepared a sample, he said. What is it? A combination of several antibiotics, growth inhibitors, and molecular markers. I thought your medicine wouldn't work on my bacteria. It won't. But if you return to a mirrored world, a mirrored version of this medicine may work there. Daniel looked from the vial to the mirror. I don't understand. If there is another version of this facility on the other side, then another version of me may be facing the same problem. Your mirror self may have entered your world when you entered ours. Daniel imagined another Daniel waking in the manor, another Daniel being taken home, another family seeing a husband and father who looked familiar but smelled food incorrectly and wrote backward. So the other me is spreading your bacteria in my world. Possibly, and my bacteria are spreading here. Yes, what happens if we switch back? We don't know. But it may allow both worlds to study the correct mirrored samples. We may be able to produce antibiotics before the organism spread beyond control. Dr. Hale held up the vial. You must take this through. Daniel approached the sealed door between the rooms. A small transfer chamber opened in the wall. Dr. Hale placed the vial inside and closed his side. A bright light filled the chamber. Several minutes passed before Daniel's side unlocked. He removed the vial. It felt cold in his hand. If I go back, Daniel said, will I see my real family again? If the theory is correct. And the men in the mirror will take me to them? If their world matches ours, they will understand what happened. You promise? Dr. Hale looked at him. No, he said quietly. I can't promise anything. Daniel closed his eyes. After a moment, he stepped toward the mirror. The workers had moved it close to a second sealed opening in the wall. The reflective surface now faced Daniel directly, separated from him only by a thin, transparent barrier. Dr. Hale entered a code. The barrier slowly lifted. Every alarm in the facility began to sound. Daniel stood before the mirror, holding the vial tightly. His reflection stood before him. For 1 second, it looked normal. Then it raised its hand before Daniel did. Daniel froze. The reflection pressed its palm against the inside of the mirror. Its lips moved. Daniel could not hear the words, but he understood them. Don't. What is it saying? Dr. Hale demanded. Daniel stepped closer. The reflection shook its head. Its eyes were wide with terror. Behind it, figures in protective suits rushed around a room that looked almost identical to the one outside Daniel's cell. One of those figures held a vial. The mirrored Dr. Hale shouted something. Daniel's reflection looked over its shoulder. Then it turned back. Its mouth formed 2 words. Too late. The mirror's surface moved like dark water. Daniel felt cold air touch his fingers. Go. Dr. Hale shouted. You have to try. Daniel reached forward. His reflection did the same. Their fingertips touched against the glass. For a single moment, Daniel felt another hand pressing against his. It was warm, real, and trembling. Images rushed through his mind. His house. His wife screaming. Emma locked behind a glass wall, the manor covered in black growth. Hospitals filled with people choking as pale mold poured from their mouths. Forests coated in shining white slime. Oceans dark with unfamiliar life. 2 worlds dying from organisms neither world could control. Daniel tried to pull his hand back. His reflection grabbed his wrist. Stop! Daniel screamed. The mirrored hand pulled harder. Dr. Hale shouted for the workers to activate the containment field. The mirror stretched outward like a sheet of liquid. Daniel's arm sank into it up to the elbow. On the other side, his reflection was being pulled forward, too. Both men screamed as their arms seemed to overlap inside the glass. The vial slipped from Daniel's fingers. His reflection caught it. For a moment, hope appeared on Dr. Hale's face. Then, the reflection dropped its own vial into Daniel's room. The 2 containers struck the floor at the same time. Both shattered. Clear liquid spread across the white tiles. Something inside the liquid moved. Tiny threads began to grow in opposite directions. Dr. Hale stepped backward. No. He whispered. The mirror made a deep, cracking sound. A thin line appeared at the top of the glass and raced downward between the two Daniels. The reflected world split into pieces. Daniel tried to pull free. His mirror self tightened its grip. The crack reached their joined hands. There was a flash of white light, a freezing wind, and the sound of countless voices screaming from very far away. Then, the mirror shattered. Story 3. Kayla's entire life revolved around her social anxiety. More specifically, it revolved around one sentence that controlled almost every decision she made. I don't want to make it awkward. That was it. That simple thought was the engine behind everything she did. If someone sat beside her on the bus and started talking, Kayla would keep smiling and nodding, even after the bus had passed her stop. She would sit there pretending to be interested while watching familiar streets disappear through the window. Then she would get off several stops later and walk home, sometimes for more than an hour, because telling the stranger that she needed to leave felt rude. If a restaurant got her order wrong, she ate it anyway. If someone insulted her and then said it was only a joke, she laughed with them. If someone crossed a personal boundary, she convinced herself that it was probably not serious enough to mention. She did all of this for one reason. Kayla could not stand the idea of people staring at her. Even imagining it made her feel sick. Her throat would tighten. Her stomach would twist painfully. Her hands would become cold and sweaty, and her heart would pound so loudly that she could hear it inside her ears. She would imagine everyone in the room turning to look at her, waiting for her to explain herself, judge her, or laugh at her. People often described Kayla as easygoing. That was not true. She was not relaxed. She was terrified. People thought she was friendly because she always smiled. They thought she was patient because she never complained. They thought she was kind because she never refused anyone. In reality, Kayla simply did not know how to say no. Sometimes she felt less like a person and more like a mannequin that could breathe. She stood where people placed her. She wore whatever expression made them comfortable. She allowed them to talk, touch, joke, and take whatever they wanted, as long as she did not have to create a difficult moment. That was why she agreed when the barista from her favorite cafe invited her to a private meeting. His name was Daniel. He had served her coffee nearly every morning for almost a year. He knew her usual order before she reached the counter, and sometimes drew little smiling faces on the cup. Kayla had never considered them friends, but Daniel always spoke to her as if they were. One afternoon, while the cafe was quiet, he leaned across the counter and lowered his voice. "Some friends and I meet on Friday nights," he said. "It's kind of a personal growth group. Meditation, conversations, getting rid of negative energy, that kind of thing." Kayla immediately wanted to refuse. She did not like groups. She did not like meeting strangers. She did not like meditation, personal growth, or anything that required sharing feelings in front of other people. But Daniel smiled at her. "You should come," he said. "I think you'd fit in." Kayla felt the familiar pressure building in her chest. If she said no, Daniel might feel rejected. The next time she came for coffee, he might act differently. He might think she disliked him. Every visit after that could become uncomfortable. She smiled. "Sure," she said. That sounds nice. The meeting took place in an old house at the edge of town. The building looked narrow and tired, with dark windows and peeling gray paint. Thick vines covered one side of the house, and the front porch leaned slightly to the left. There were no nearby streetlights, so the house seemed to float inside the darkness. Kayla stood outside for several minutes, trying to gather enough courage to knock. She could still leave. She could send Daniel a message and tell him she felt sick. She could pretend she had forgotten. But then the front door opened. Daniel stood there, smiling. "You came," he said warmly. Kayla forced herself to smile back. The inside of the house was darker than she expected. There were no overhead lights. Candles covered tables, windowsills, shelves, and even parts of the floor. Their flames made the shadows move across the walls like slow, nervous hands. The house smelled of incense, old wood, and something slightly sweet that Kayla could not identify. There were about 12 people inside. They acted strangely comfortable with one another. Not fake friendly or overly cheerful, but intimate, like they had known each other for years. They sat close together. They touched one another's shoulders. They finished each other's sentences. Kayla had been inside the house for less than 30 seconds when a woman named Ruth wrapped both arms around her. "You must be Kayla," Ruth said. Kayla froze. She hated being touched, especially by strangers. Her first instinct was to pull away, but that would have made everyone notice. Ruth might feel embarrassed. Daniel might think Kayla was rude. So Kayla slowly raised her arms and hugged Ruth back. "You're safe here," Ruth whispered. The sentence should have comforted her. Instead, it made something cold move through her stomach. The first few meetings were strange, but not frightening. At least, not openly frightening. Everyone sat in a circle on the floor. They talked about energy, emotional wounds, spiritual connections, and the invisible forces that supposedly moved through every living thing. Sometimes they closed their eyes and listened to Ruth speak. Sometimes they held hands. Sometimes they shared painful memories. Kayla never shared much. When it was her turn, she said something small about feeling nervous around people. Everyone nodded as if she had revealed a deep secret. "We understand you," Ruth told her. No one had ever said that to Kayla before. At midnight, everyone stood beside the walls and knocked 3 times before leaving. The first time it happened, Kayla almost laughed. It looked ridiculous. 13 adults walked around the room, placed their hands against the walls, and knocked 3 times with serious expressions. Kayla waited for someone to smile. No one did. Daniel looked almost frightened while he knocked. Ruth closed her eyes and whispered something Kayla could not hear. Kayla wanted to ask what they were doing, but everyone else seemed to understand. Asking would have drawn attention to her. They might have stopped and explained it while everyone watched her. So she copied them. 3 soft knocks. Then she left. For several weeks, the meetings remained strange, but mostly harmless. One night, Ruth handed everyone a small piece of paper and a pencil. "Write the name of someone who hurt you," she said. Soft classical music played from an old speaker in the corner. People lowered their heads and began writing. Kayla stared at the empty paper in her lap. Many names came to mind. People who had mocked her, used her, embarrassed her, or made her feel small. In the end, she wrote her own name. She folded the paper before anyone could see it. One by one, The members stepped forward and dropped their papers into a metal bowl. Ruth lit them with a match. The papers curled and blackened as smoke rose toward the ceiling. It seemed dramatic, but harmless. Then, Kayla noticed something beneath the ashes. Small white objects rested at the bottom of the bowl. At first, she thought they were stones. Then one of them rolled toward the side, and the candlelight reflected off its smooth surface. It was a tooth, a human tooth. There were several of them. Some were yellow, some were cracked. One still had a dark red stain near the root. Kayla looked around the circle. No one reacted. Daniel watched the burning papers with a peaceful smile. Ruth continued whispering about releasing pain. A man sitting across from Kayla had tears running down his cheeks. Maybe the teeth were fake. Maybe they were animal teeth. Maybe it was part of the ceremony. Kayla could have asked. She could have pointed into the bowl and said, "Are those human teeth?" But then everyone would look at her. The ceremony would stop. Someone would have to explain. The thought of that moment felt unbearable. So Kayla said nothing. That was how it began. Every insane thing entered her life silently. No one explained it. No one asked whether she accepted it. The strange things simply appeared, one after another, and Kayla allowed them to stay because questioning them would have been uncomfortable. Months passed, and the rituals became more disturbing. One night, they stood barefoot in a freezing river beneath the moon. The water reached Kayla's knees, and sharp rocks cut into her feet. Everyone held hands, while Ruth repeated words in a language Kayla did not understand. Kayla's teeth shook from the cold. Daniel noticed and squeezed her hand. "You're doing great," he whispered. So she stayed. Another night, they buried glass jars beside an abandoned railway line. The jars contained thick red liquid. Blood, Kayla assumed. She never asked where it came from. At another meeting, everyone sat blindfolded in complete silence while someone walked slowly around the room. Kayla could hear heavy breathing behind her. The person stopped several times, leaning so close that warm breath touched the back of her neck. She wanted to remove the blindfold. She wanted to stand up and run. But no one else moved. So she stayed still. Each week, Kayla told herself the same thing. "This is insane. I am not coming back." Then, at the end of every meeting, someone would smile warmly and say, "We're really glad you're here." That sentence affected her more deeply than common sense ever could. Kayla had spent most of her life feeling like an extra person, someone who could disappear from a room without being noticed, someone people remembered only when they needed a favor. But this group noticed her. They saved a place for her in the circle. They asked how her week had been. They touched her shoulder when she looked upset. They told her she belonged. Even when the meetings frightened her, the feeling of being included pulled her back. The first truly terrifying moment happened in Ruth's basement. As soon as Kayla reached the bottom of the stairs, she almost turned around. The air smelled rotten. Not like spoiled food or dirty drains. It was a heavier smell, wet and sweet, like meat left in a warm room. Candles covered nearly every surface. Their flames filled the basement with weak orange light. The walls were unfinished concrete, and dark marks had been painted across them in circles and crooked lines. In the center of the room sat a man tied to a wooden chair. He was not pretending. This was not part of a harmless performance. His wrists were tied so tightly that the skin had split. Blood ran down his hands and dripped from his fingertips. Thick tape covered his mouth. One eye was swollen shut, and the other moved wildly around the room. When he saw Kayla, he made a desperate sound behind the tape. Kayla stopped on the final stair. Every alarm in her body went off at once. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her legs went weak. Her mouth became so dry that she could hardly swallow. This was real. A man was tied to a chair. He was hurt. He needed help. Yet no one else reacted. Members of the group stood around the basement, speaking quietly and pouring drinks. Someone laughed near the corner. Daniel adjusted the candles. A woman Kayla had seen many times walked past the prisoner without looking at him. They treated the man like furniture. Kayla waited for someone to explain. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe he was an actor. Maybe this was some strange exercise. But the man's fear looked real. His breathing came in sharp, broken sounds through his nose. He pulled against the ropes until more blood appeared around his wrists. Ruth noticed Kayla standing near the stairs. She crossed the room calmly. "Hey," Ruth said softly. "Are you okay?" Kayla looked at the man. Then she looked at Ruth. This was the moment. She could leave. A normal person would leave. A normal person would scream, call the police, untie the man, or demand an explanation. Kayla imagined herself running up the stairs. Everyone would turn toward her. Someone might stop her. Ruth might ask why she was upset. Kayla would have to accuse them of kidnapping or hurting someone. The room would become silent. All those faces would stare at her. The thought made her body lock in place. "I'm fine," Kayla heard herself say. The man in the chair began making louder sounds. His body jerked violently against the ropes. Several people turned to look at him. Not Kayla. For a moment, she felt relieved. A tall man standing across the room picked up a ceramic bowl. Kayla had seen him at several meetings, but she could not remember his name. He walked toward her and held out the bowl. "Can you help me with this?" he asked. Kayla stared at it. She did not understand what he wanted her to do. The bowl was white, deep, and decorated with small blue flowers around the edge. It looked like something a grandmother might use to serve soup. Everyone seemed to be waiting. The man held it closer. Kayla wanted to say no. The word formed inside her mind, but it never reached her mouth. No would require an explanation. No would make him uncomfortable. No would make everyone look at her. Kayla took the bowl. "Thanks," the tall man said. The prisoner began thrashing harder. A young man wearing a blue hoodie stepped behind the chair and grabbed the prisoner's head. The prisoner tried to twist away, but the ropes held him in place. Something sharp flashed in the candlelight. Kayla lowered her eyes. She stared at the floor. She heard the sound of struggling. A muffled scream. Someone whispered for the man to stay still. Then hot liquid splashed across Kayla's hands. The bowl became heavier. She kept looking down. The liquid smelled like iron. A drop ran across her thumb and fell onto the floor. Kayla wanted to drop the bowl, but she imagined it breaking. Everyone would be upset. The ritual would be interrupted. She would have to apologize. So she held it more tightly. The prisoner's movements slowly weakened. Then they stopped. Kayla did not know how long she stood there. Maybe a few seconds. Maybe several minutes. The room seemed very far away. Voices floated around her as if she were underwater. People thanked her. That was the sickest part. They smiled at her and told her she had been helpful. They treated her as if she had done something kind. Useful included, Ruth placed one hand on Kayla's shoulder. "You did great tonight," she said. Kayla went home before sunrise. She locked her apartment door and stood in the kitchen, staring at her hands. She had washed them several times at Ruth's house, but she could still smell the blood. Dark red marks remained beneath her fingernails. Kayla began to shake. She reached the bathroom and threw up into the toilet. She threw up until there was nothing left inside her stomach. Then she sat on the bathroom floor until morning, hugging her knees while sunlight slowly appeared through the window. She told herself she would never return. She would block Daniel's number. She would stop visiting the calf. She would contact the police. She would move to another city if necessary. But when Friday came, Kayla found herself standing outside the old house again. She had not called the police. She had not blocked anyone. She had spent the entire week imagining what would happen if she disappeared from the group. Daniel might message her. Ruth might visit her apartment. They would know that she was frightened. They might wonder whether she planned to tell someone. And after what had happened in the basement, not coming back would make everything unbearably awkward. So Kayla returned. No one mentioned the man. No one asked whether she was upset. Ruth hugged her at the door. "We missed you," she said. Kayla hugged her back. After a while, the fear became background noise. That frightened Kayla more than anything else. Human beings could adapt to almost anything. It was a disgusting talent. At first, every ritual had made her sick. Every strange smell made her heart race. Every locked door made her think about running. Then, slowly, it all became normal. Soon, Kayla was helping carry heavy garbage bags out of the house at 3 a.m. The bags were warm. Sometimes they leaked. She never asked what was inside them. She helped place them into the trunks of cars. She wiped dark stains from the floor. She washed bowls and knives in Ruth's kitchen, while other members talked about their jobs, relationships, and weekend plans. She stopped reacting to the chanting. She stopped reacting to the smell. She stopped reacting when members spoke about the holiness under the house as if it were a person living below them. They referred to it with love and fear. Sometimes Ruth called it the Father below. Sometimes Daniel called it the listener. Once Kayla heard scratching beneath the basement floor while everyone else was upstairs. The sound moved slowly from one side of the room to the other. She stood still and listened. 3 knocks came from beneath the concrete. Kayla left the basement without saying anything. She did not ask about that either. At work, she continued living like a normal person. She answered emails. She attended meetings. She drank coffee with coworkers and laughed at jokes she did not find funny. Sometimes she would look down at her keyboard and notice dried blood beneath one of her fingernails. No one else noticed. In fact, her coworkers seemed to like her more than before. She no longer worried about every small conversation. She did not replay every sentence in her mind for hours. She did not panic when someone disagreed with her. After spending her weekends around people who might be murderers, ordinary social situations no longer felt frightening. "You seem more confident lately," one coworker told her. Kayla nearly laughed in her face. Confidence had nothing to do with it. She was simply too tired to feel anxious. Her fear had been used so often that it had worn thin, like fabric pulled apart by too many hands. "Maybe it's my haircut," Kayla said with a small laugh. Her coworker smiled. "I like it." Kayla looked at her. Her name was Emily. She was kind, quiet, and new to the office. She often ate lunch alone. Kayla recognized something familiar in the way Emily avoided eye contact and apologized for things that were not her fault. For a moment, Kayla imagined Emily inside the old house, sitting in the candlelight, holding hands with Ruth, standing barefoot in the river, carrying a warm garbage bag toward a waiting car. Kayla should have felt horrified by the thought. Instead, she felt something else. Relief. If Emily joined, Kayla would not be the newest person anymore. She would not be alone during the rituals. She might finally have someone beside her who understood how difficult it was to refuse. Kayla smiled warmly, exactly the way Ruth had smiled at her months earlier. "Are you free next week?" she asked. "Do you want to join me for a club activity?" Story 4. I'm a 20-year-old college student, and until recently, I believed I was good at taking care of myself. I had always been proud of being independent. I paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, managed my classes, and worked enough hours to cover most of my expenses. My parents lived several hours away, and although they called me often, I tried not to worry them. I wanted them to see me as an adult who could handle her own problems. My apartment was small, but it was mine. It was on the third floor of an old building about 20 minutes from campus. The place had one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living area that was barely large enough for a couch and a desk. The pipes made strange sounds at night, and the floorboards creaked whenever the weather became cold, but I had gotten used to those noises. My college schedule was difficult. I had morning classes 4 days a week, and several nights a week I worked at a small local cafe near the edge of campus. It was the kind of place where students came to study, couples met for quiet dates, and older customers sat by the window drinking the same coffee every evening. Most of my shifts ended after midnight. By the time I locked the cafe doors, cleaned the counters, counted the register, and helped the manager close the kitchen, I was usually too tired to think properly. I would put on my coat, tighten the straps of my bag, and begin the long walk back to my apartment. The streets were normally quiet at that hour. There were a few convenience stores still open, along with a gas station and a 24-hour laundromat, but most of the buildings were dark. I often walked with one earbud in, keeping the other ear free so I could hear anyone approaching. I knew walking alone after midnight was not completely safe, but I had done it so many times that it had become normal. I stayed on the main roads, avoided dark alleys, and kept my phone ready in my hand. Nothing bad had ever happened to me. At least, not until the roses started appearing. The first rose showed up on a Monday morning. I arrived at my lecture hall a few minutes before class and found a single red rose lying across my desk. It was fresh, with tiny drops of water still shining on its petals. There was no card, no name, and no message. I looked around the room, expecting someone to smile or laugh. A few students were talking near the door. 2 girls in the back were taking pictures of each other. A guy I recognized from another class was staring down at his laptop. Nobody seemed interested in me. I sat down and picked up the rose. For a moment, I felt embarrassed, but in a pleasant way. I wondered whether one of the students in my class had left it there. Maybe someone had noticed me but was too shy to introduce himself. I had never considered myself especially beautiful. I was average height, with dark hair that I usually tied back because I never had enough time to style it. Most mornings I wore comfortable clothes and very little makeup. Still, the rose made me smile. I placed it carefully inside my notebook so it would not get damaged, and I spent most of the lecture wondering who had left it. No one admitted to it. A few days later, another gift appeared. This time, it happened at the cafe. I had stepped into the back room to carry a tray of clean cups to the front counter. When I returned, I saw something sitting on one of the empty tables near the window. It was a mug. Not just any mug, but a white mug, decorated with characters from Masha and the Bear. It was exactly like the one I had owned since I was 15. That old mug had been my favorite. My younger cousin had given it to me for my birthday, and I had taken it everywhere. I sometimes carried it to campus because I liked drinking tea from it while studying. A week earlier, I had dropped it outside the library. The handle had broken off, and the side had cracked into several pieces. I had thrown it into a trash bin, feeling more upset than I wanted to admit. The mug on the cafe table looked almost identical. Beside it was a small juice box from the exact brand I always bought between classes. For several seconds, I simply stood there and stared. One of my coworkers, Sarah, noticed my expression and asked what was wrong. I showed her the mug and juice box. She laughed and told me I had a secret admirer. "Someone is paying attention," she said. I asked whether she had seen anyone leave them. She said she had been in the kitchen and had not noticed. Our security camera covered the counter and front entrance, but the table was partly hidden by a large plant. When we checked the recording, we saw customers entering and leaving, but it was impossible to tell who had placed the gifts there. At that time, I did not feel afraid. I felt flattered. Someone knew what kind of mug I liked. Someone knew what drink I often bought. It seemed personal, but not dangerous. I imagined it was a shy student from campus or perhaps one of the regular customers at the cafe. Maybe he had seen me carrying the old mug before it broke. Maybe he had noticed me buying the juice. I even began paying more attention to the people around me. There was a quiet boy in my morning class who sometimes looked in my direction. There was also a man who came into the cafe 3 nights a week and always sat near the back wall. Neither of them spoke to me more than necessary. I wondered if one of them was responsible. Part of me enjoyed the mystery. That feeling did not last long. The direct messages began the following week. The first one came from an account with no profile picture, no posts, and no followers. "Your new bag looks good on you today." I read the message while sitting in the college library. I had bought the bag only 2 days earlier. It was dark green, and that morning was the first time I had carried it to campus. I looked around the library. Rows of students sat at tables, reading books or typing on laptops. A group near the windows was whispering and laughing. A young man in a gray hoodie walked between the shelves. No one appeared to be watching me. I told myself the sender had probably seen me earlier. Maybe it was still the shy admirer. I did not reply. That night, another message came. "You looked so exhausted during your cafe shift." The words made me uncomfortable. I had worked until nearly 1 in the morning, and the cafe had been unusually busy. By closing time, my feet hurt, my head was pounding, and I could barely keep my eyes open. I tried to remember every customer who had come inside. There had been students, 2 police officers, an older couple, and several people who ordered drinks to take away. Nobody stood out. I blocked the account. The next day, a new account messaged me. "You shouldn't block people who care about you." That was the moment the gifts stopped feeling sweet. I showed the messages to Sarah. She told me to report them to the college and the police. I hesitated. The sender had not threatened me. He had only commented on things he had seen. I worried the police would say there was nothing they could do. I also worried I would look dramatic. Instead, I changed my social media settings and made all my accounts private. For 2 days, there were no new messages. I began to relax. Then I found another rose pushed through the gap beneath my apartment door. The stem had been cut short, and the flower was lying on the floor inside my hallway. My apartment building required a key to enter after 8 in the evening. Someone had either followed another tenant inside or already had access to the building. I picked up the rose using a paper towel and threw it away. That night, I checked every lock twice. I also placed an empty glass bottle against the front door so it would fall and make noise if someone entered. Nothing happened. The next morning, the bottle was still standing. I tried to convince myself I was safe. Over the next several days, the messages became more frequent. You should wear your hair down more often. You forgot your umbrella this morning. You always sit near the left window in the library. You looked beautiful when you laughed at lunch. Each message proved that the sender was watching me. Sometimes he knew what I was wearing before I had posted any pictures. Sometimes he mentioned places I had visited only minutes earlier. I began looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. On campus, I studied every face. At the cafe, I watched each customer carefully. During my walks home, I turned around every few minutes. I never saw anyone following me. That frightened me more than anything. A careless stalker would have made a mistake. He would have appeared too often or stood too close. I would have noticed the same car, the same jacket, or the same face. This person seemed invisible. I changed my route home. The next night, a message appeared. The new street is quieter, but it takes you 7 minutes longer. After that, I started taking a ride share whenever I could afford it. But college life was expensive, and my pay from the cafe was not enough to cover rides every night. I still had to walk sometimes. I bought pepper spray. I also started carrying a small alarm on my keychain. The Glock came later. My father had taught me how to shoot when I was younger. He believed everyone in the family should understand firearm safety, even if they never planned to own a weapon. When I told him someone might be following me, I left out most of the frightening details. I said I had been getting strange messages and felt unsafe walking home. He offered to come and stay with me. I refused. I told him I could handle it. A few days later, after following all the legal requirements, I brought the gun to my apartment. I kept it secured when I was away and placed it within reach when I was home at night. I hoped I would never have to touch it. For a while, simply knowing it was there helped me sleep. The messages continued. Some were almost romantic. Others were controlling. You don't need to talk to that man from your class. Don't smile at strangers. I know you're tired, but you should eat something. I'm the only one who truly notices you. I stopped responding completely. I reported each account, but new ones kept appearing. I also spoke to campus security. They listened politely, took notes, and told me to call if I saw the person or received a direct threat. But I had no name, no face, and no clear evidence of who was doing it. They advised me not to walk alone. That advice would have been more useful if I had someone available to walk with me after every shift. My manager adjusted my schedule for a few nights, but the cafe was short-staffed. Eventually, I returned to closing shifts. The night everything changed began like any other difficult shift. The cafe was crowded because several students were preparing for exams. Every table was occupied. People ordered drinks faster than we could make them, and someone spilled an iced coffee across the floor near the register. By midnight, my back hurt, and my hands smelled like coffee grounds and cleaning liquid. When we finally locked the doors, It was almost 1 in the morning. Sarah offered to drive me home, but she lived in the opposite direction and looked as tired as I felt. I told her I would be fine. I ordered a rideshare, but the driver canceled after several minutes. The next available car was more than half an hour away. I decided to walk. The streets were cold and almost empty. I kept my hand inside my coat pocket, wrapped around the pepper spray. Every sound made me turn my head. A car passed slowly beside me, and my heart began racing, but it continued down the road without stopping. A man stood outside the laundromat, smoking a cigarette. He watched me for a moment, then looked away. I walked faster. When I reached my building, I checked the street before unlocking the front entrance. No one was behind me. I climbed the stairs, entered my apartment, and immediately locked the door. I turned the deadbolt. I checked the windows. I looked behind the shower curtain, beneath the bed, and inside the small storage closet near the kitchen. The bedroom wardrobe was closed. Everything appeared normal. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. I changed into a loose shirt and sweatpants, washed my face, and heated some leftover soup. I was exhausted, but I had an exam coming up and still needed to study. At around 1:30, I carried my notes into the bedroom. My desk lamp gave off a weak yellow light. I had meant to replace the bulb, but I kept forgetting. The corners of the room remained dark, and shadows gathered around the furniture. I closed the blinds tightly. The curtains were white, though they looked gray under the dim light. I sat on the bed with my textbooks spread around me. For almost 30 minutes, I managed to focus. I reviewed several pages, wrote notes, and tried not to think about the messages. The building was unusually quiet. Normally, I could hear the people in the apartment above me moving around. A television often played somewhere down the hall. Cars passed outside, and pipes clicked inside the walls. That night, every sound seemed distant. At exactly 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed so violently that I almost dropped my pen. The screen showed a message from an unknown number. "You're studying so hard after such a long shift." My mouth went dry. A second message appeared before I could move. "But your room light is much too dim." Then, another. "You don't want to hurt those beautiful eyes, do you?" I stared at the words. My blinds were closed. The curtains covered the entire window. There was no gap large enough for someone outside to see through. I slowly turned toward the window. Nothing moved. The white curtains hung perfectly still. I stood and walked closer, careful not to make noise. My fingers shook as I touched the edge of the curtain. I did not open it. Instead, I checked the lock. It was secure. My phone buzzed again. I looked down. I'm not watching from the dark street. For 1 second, my mind refused to understand. Then, the next line appeared. "The white curtains always look better from the inside." A cold feeling spread through my entire body. I stopped breathing. The message could mean only one thing. He was not outside. He was inside my apartment. I wanted to scream, but fear tightened around my throat. My first thought was to run. The front door was only a few steps away, but the bedroom stood at the far end of the apartment. To reach the exit, I would have to cross the living area and pass several dark spaces where someone could be hiding. My second thought was to call the police. I slowly unlocked my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly that I pressed the wrong numbers. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, stay calm. I listened carefully. At first, I heard nothing. The room was completely still. Even the usual sounds of the city seemed to have vanished. No engines, no voices, no footsteps from the hallway. Only silence. I began to wonder whether the message was a trick. Maybe he was still outside. Maybe he wanted me to panic and imagine things. Then I heard it. A soft, sniffing sound. It came from somewhere inside the bedroom. It was quiet, but clear. A slow breath pulled in through a human nose. My skin tightened with horror. I remained frozen beside the window. Several seconds passed. Then I heard it again. A longer breath this time. Someone was smelling the air. Someone was close enough for me to hear him breathe. I scanned the room. The bed was too low for a person to hide beneath it. The door to the bathroom was open, and I could see most of the room from where I stood. My eyes moved toward the corner. The heavy wooden wardrobe stood against the wall. It was old, wide, and deep. It had come with the apartment, and I used it to store coats, dresses, boxes, and several bags. I had checked it when I came home. At least, I thought I had. The right door was no longer fully closed. A narrow black gap had appeared between the doors. It was only a few centimeters wide. I stared at it. Something pale moved inside. At first, I thought it was a piece of clothing shifting. Then the shape became clear. An eye. A wide human eye was staring at me through the crack. The white part looked bright in the darkness. The pupil was fixed directly on my face. Neither of us moved. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs that I was sure he could hear it. The eye blinked once. Slowly, my phone buzzed in my hand. I nearly screamed. I looked down at the new message. The smell of your clothes is so beautiful. Another message followed. It made the waiting worth it. My eyes lifted toward the wardrobe again. The eye was still there. Then the final message appeared. Especially because I'm holding your favorite Masha mug in here with me. A quiet tapping sound came from inside the wardrobe. Ceramic against wood. Tap, tap, tap. The exact sound of a mug being touched against the inside wall. My fear turned into something else. Rage. This person had watched me for weeks. He had followed me to class. He had entered my workplace. He had learned my schedule. He had come into my building, entered my apartment, touched my things, and hidden among my clothes. The gifts had never been romantic. They had been warnings. He wanted me to know that he could reach me anywhere. I understood what he expected to happen next. He believed I was trapped. He believed I would scream, beg, or freeze while he stepped out of the wardrobe. Maybe he planned to grab me. Maybe he had a knife, rope, or something worse. Maybe he had imagined this moment so many times that he thought it belonged to him. But he had made a mistake. He had watched me closely, but not closely enough. He knew my class schedule. He knew my favorite drink. He knew which mug I loved. He knew what time I came home. But he did not know what was beneath my pillow. I had placed the Glock there after returning from work. The bed stood only 2 steps behind me. I forced myself not to look at it. The eye inside the wardrobe watched every movement. I slowly lowered myself onto the edge of the mattress. I pretended my legs had become weak. Maybe he believed I was giving up. The wardrobe door moved slightly. A soft creak crossed the room. I reached behind me. My fingers slipped beneath the pillow. They touched cold metal. Inside the wardrobe, the man released a slow, pleased breath. He thought he had won. I wrapped my hand around the grip and pulled the gun close to my body, keeping it hidden beside my leg. My fear did not disappear. My hands were still trembling. My mouth was dry, and every part of me wanted to run, but beneath the terror was a strange calm. I remembered my father's voice. Know what is behind your target. Keep your finger away from the trigger until you are ready. Do not point it unless you believe you are in immediate danger. I was in danger. There was no doubt about that. The wardrobe door opened another inch. A pale hand appeared around the edge. The fingers were long and dirty. One of them held the handle of my Masha and the bear mug. The mug looked almost exactly like the one I had broken. Now I understood. He had probably taken the broken pieces from the trash. He had replaced it, so I would believe the gesture was thoughtful. He had wanted me to feel special. Wanted, chosen the wardrobe door opened wider. I saw part of his face. He was smiling. It was not a nervous or embarrassed smile. It was the smile of someone who had spent a long time imagining this moment. His hair was damp with sweat. His face looked too pale. One cheek was pressed against my hanging clothes. He whispered my name. The sound was soft and loving. That made it worse. I pulled the gun from behind my leg and aimed it at him. His smile vanished. For the first time since the messages began, I saw surprise in his eyes. He had expected a frightened girl. He had expected easy prey. Instead, he was staring down the barrel of a gun. "Don't move," I said. My voice shook, but the weapon stayed pointed at him. His gaze moved from my face to the gun. The wardrobe door remained half open. I could not see his other hand. That frightened me. "Show me both hands," I said. He did not listen. His smile slowly returned. Then he pushed the wardrobe door wider. Something dark and metallic flashed near his hidden hand. A knife. He had been waiting inside my wardrobe with a knife. I tightened my grip. The room seemed to shrink around us. The desk lamp buzzed softly. The white curtains hung behind me. My books lay open on the bed. My phone rested beside my knee, still glowing with his final message. He leaned forward, as though he still believed I would hesitate. Maybe he thought I was too young. Maybe he thought I was too frightened. Maybe he thought all those weeks of watching me had taught him everything, but he had never understood me at all. I was exhausted. I was terrified. I was trapped in my own bedroom at 2 a.m. with a stranger hiding among my clothes. But I was not helpless. His foot moved out of the wardrobe. The knife rose in his hand, and my finger settled against the trigger. Story 5. I need to tell you about a folder I have been avoiding. Since I returned from Marble Fork, I have hardly left my house. I have gone outside a few times to collect the mail or bring in groceries, but that is all. I have not visited anyone. I have not answered most of my calls. The curtains stay closed, even during the day, and I have started forgetting what time it is, unless I check the clock. The pull I described before, the force that took me all the way to California, did not disappear when I came home. I thought it would. I thought that once I left Marble Fork, once I put enough distance between myself and that station, the feeling would fade. It did not fade. It only changed direction. Before, the pull pointed west. It dragged at me from somewhere beyond the mountains, calling me toward a place I had never seen, but somehow knew I needed to find. Now it does not point west anymore. It points down. Down toward the floor beside my desk, toward the old box, toward the files inside it. Every time I try to ignore the box, I feel restless. My skin begins to itch. My thoughts become scattered. I walk from room to room without knowing what I am doing. I try watching television, but I cannot follow anything happening on the screen. I try reading, but I reach the bottom of a page and realize I have not understood a single word. The only thing that makes the feeling stop is opening the box. Then I pull out another file, and another, and another. The pull becomes quiet while I am reading, but it never truly leaves. It waits patiently. As soon as I close one folder, it points me toward the next. I sleep maybe 3 hours a night now, sometimes less. I wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning with my heart beating hard, convinced that someone has whispered my name from the hallway. Other times, I wake up sitting at my desk with an open folder in front of me and no memory of getting out of bed. I have started keeping a lamp on all night. It does not help. The darkness in the corners of my room seems deeper than it used to be. Sometimes I think I see movement near the box, like a shadow bending over it. When I turn my head, nothing is there. I have also lost weight, a lot of it, judging by the way my clothes hang from my body. I do not remember the last proper meal I ate. Food tastes like paper now. I chew because I know I am supposed to, but I rarely feel hungry. 2 days ago, I went into the bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. For 1 second, I did not recognize the person looking back at me. I honestly thought someone else was standing in the room. The face in the mirror looked older than mine. The cheeks were hollow. The skin beneath the eyes was dark and bruised. The hair looked thinner, and there were lines around the mouth that I did not remember having. Then I moved, and the reflection moved with me. I stood there for several minutes, gripping the edge of the sink. I looked like something had been feeding on me, not biting me, not tearing at my body, draining me slowly, taking something each night and leaving just enough behind to keep me alive. But that is not why I am writing tonight. There is a folder in the box that I have been avoiding for 30 years. I did not know I was avoiding it. That is the worst part. I did not make a choice to leave it alone. I never looked at the name and decided I was not ready. It was more subtle than that. Every time I went through the box, this folder somehow ended up at the bottom of the pile. I would lift it, then place another file on top of it. I would reach toward it, hesitate, and pick up something else instead. Sometimes I would remove every folder from the box, spread them across the floor, and still manage to leave this one unopened. I have done that dozens of times, maybe hundreds. Until last night, I had never noticed. It was as if my hands knew not to touch it before my mind could ask why. Last night, I was sitting on the floor beside the box. It was after midnight. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the house was so quiet that I could hear the refrigerator turning on in the kitchen. I had already read 2 reports. One was about a camper who vanished near a dry riverbed. The other concerned a ranger who claimed to hear voices coming from beneath a fire lookout. I placed both folders beside me and reached into the box. My fingers touched the folder. Then they moved away. I picked up another file. I froze. For the first time, I noticed what I had done. I stared at my hand. It was holding a folder about animal attacks in Oregon, but I had not meant to choose it. I could remember reaching for the file beneath it. I put the Oregon folder down. Then, I reached into the box again. My fingers touched the same folder. Again, my hand tried to pull away. This time, I did not let it. I grabbed the folder and lifted it out. The moment I did, my hands began to shake. Not from fear, at least not the kind of fear I had felt while reading the other reports. This was something else, something heavier. My chest tightened so quickly that I thought I was having a heart attack. My throat closed. My eyes filled with tears. I pressed the folder against my knees and tried to breathe. I had no idea why I was reacting that way. I have read files about people disappearing without a trace. I have read reports about rangers being ordered to lie. I have read descriptions of things growing in caves that should never have been alive. I have seen photographs that I still cannot look at for more than a few seconds. None of those things made me cry. But holding this folder did. The tears came before I opened it. The folder was old and soft at the edges. The paper had turned yellow. There was a dark mark near the top, as if someone had held it many times with a dirty thumb. A name had been typed on the label. Ellen Voss. The file was a missing person report dated November 1978. It came from the same district as the station where I found the box. The subject was a seasonal ranger. Female, 31 years old. Her name was Ellen Voss. Her station stood 11 miles from Station 11C, where the ranger named Machen had worked. Machen was the same ranger whose reports kept appearing throughout the box. His name was everywhere once I started looking for it. Sometimes it was printed clearly. Sometimes it appeared in handwritten notes. Sometimes only his initials were there. The missing person report was short, too short. It was almost empty, as if the person writing it had included only the details required to complete the form and nothing more. There was no emotion in it, no urgency, no sense that a human being had vanished. Ranger Voss failed to report for her shift on November 9th, 1978. A welfare check was requested after she did not answer her radio. 2 rangers arrived at her station that afternoon. The station was empty. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, no blood, no damage to the door or windows. Her belongings were still inside. Her pack hung from a hook beside the door. Her radio sat on the desk. Her jacket was draped over the back of a chair. A half-filled cup of coffee stood beside an open notebook. The report did not say whether the coffee was warm or cold when they found it. It did not say what was written in the notebook. It did not even say whether the notebook was taken as evidence. The report mentioned her bed. The blankets were pulled back, suggesting that she had been sleeping shortly before she disappeared. Her boots were beside the bed, side by side. That detail stopped me. I read it several times. Her boots were beside her bed, not near the door, not missing, not placed somewhere by accident. They were neatly arranged next to each other as if she had taken them off before going to sleep. Outside the station, the ground was cold and damp. The search team should have found footprints if she had left on foot. Even if the soil near the station was too hard, there were muddy areas along the trails. There were fallen leaves, wet grass, loose stones. But there were no tracks, no bare footprints, no boot prints, nothing. The search covered a 10-mile radius. Rangers, volunteers, and 2 tracking dogs were involved. They checked the trails, riverbanks, ridges, and abandoned service roads. They searched old cabins and storage buildings. A helicopter flew over the area on the 2nd and 3rd days. They found no clothing, no blood, no sign of an animal attack, no sign that anyone had forced her to leave. The dogs could not follow her scent beyond the station. The report claimed that weather conditions may have affected the search, but the weather notes showed only light rain and low temperatures. Nothing severe enough to remove every trace of a person. On the fourth day, one member of the search team reported something unusual. There was a cave entrance about 1 mile from Ellen's station. The ground near the opening showed signs of recent disturbance. There were scuff marks in the soil, broken branches, and several stones that seemed to have been moved. The searcher could not tell whether the marks were caused by a person or an animal. He logged the location and recommended that the cave be searched. No cave search was authorized. 1 mile from her station. A cave entrance with fresh scuff marks. A ranger missing without her boots. And nobody went inside. I kept reading, expecting to find another page. I thought there had to be a follow-up report. Maybe the cave was searched later. Maybe another team came back. Maybe they sent someone with climbing equipment or lights. There was nothing. The search was called off on November 16th, only 7 days after Ellen disappeared. She was classified as a voluntary departure. That is what the report said. A woman left her boots, pack, radio, jacket, money, and personal belongings behind. She walked out of her station barefoot in November, crossed cold and muddy ground without leaving a single print, and vanished. And they called it voluntary. There was no mention of where she might have gone, no mention of a vehicle, no bus ticket, no phone call, no letter, no reason. The report simply suggested that she may have chosen to leave her position without informing anyone. The words felt cruel. They made her disappearance sound careless, as if Ellen had caused trouble for everyone by walking away, as if the people searching for her had done enough, and she was responsible for not being found. I was angry when I reached the final page, but beneath the anger, there was something worse. Grief. It came from somewhere deep inside me. My hands were still shaking. Tears had fallen onto the report, leaving small dark marks on the old paper. The folder carried the same stamp as the others. Do not file. The words were printed in red ink across the bottom corner. But beneath the stamp, written lightly in pencil, there was one sentence. The handwriting did not match the official report. It was small, neat, and careful. She did not leave. She was taken. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on the cassette tape label. I had seen it beside photographs in other folders. I had seen it in the margins of reports where someone had added dates, locations, and warnings. The handwriting belonged to Machen. I sat there with the folder open in my lap, staring at that sentence. She did not leave. She was taken. Machen knew something. Maybe he knew exactly what happened. Ellen's station was only 11 miles from his. He must have heard about the disappearance. He may have joined the search. The report did not list the full search team, so I could not tell whether his name had been removed or simply never recorded. But he had this file. He had written inside it. Then, he had hidden it behind a wall with the others. There was one more thing in the folder. I almost missed it. Something thin was tucked behind the final page. It was not clipped or stapled to the report. It had simply been slid inside, as though someone had added it later and did not want it permanently attached. It was a photograph, small, black and white. The corners were soft and rounded from being handled many times. The image showed 2 people standing outside a ranger station. Judging by the light in the trees, the photograph had been taken in late summer. The sun was low, creating long shadows across the ground. The woman wore a ranger uniform. Ellen, I knew it was her before I turned the photograph over and saw her name written on the back. She was smiling, not a wide smile, not the stiff expression people use for official photographs. It was a quiet smile, the kind you give when you are looking at someone you trust, the kind you give when the person holding the camera matters to you. Except someone else must have been holding the camera, because there was a man standing beside her. He was also wearing a ranger uniform. He was taller than Ellen. His body was turned slightly toward her. He was not smiling. He was not even looking at the camera. He was looking at Ellen. The expression on his face was difficult to see because the photograph was small and slightly out of focus, but the way he stood made everything clear. To him, Ellen was the only thing in the frame that mattered. I stared at the photograph for a very long time. I do not know how long. At some point, the rain stopped. The house became completely silent. The lamp beside me flickered once, but I did not look away. I have read dozens of files from that box. I have read names and dates and short, cold descriptions of lives that ended without explanation. I have read final radio messages. I have read witness statements from terrified people who later changed their stories. I thought I had become numb to it. Then I found that photograph. Someone took it because they wanted to remember that moment. It was not evidence. It was not part of an official report. It was personal. Someone wanted to remember Ellen standing in the evening sunlight. Someone wanted to remember that small smile. Someone wanted to remember the way she looked before she vanished. Then somebody placed the picture inside a folder stamped "Do Not File." Then somebody hid it behind a wall. Ellen was 31 years old. She had her own station. The report described her as quiet and private, but well-liked by the people who worked with her. She completed her duties on time. She rarely complained. She volunteered for difficult shifts. She preferred working alone, but was known to share coffee with passing rangers. That was all the files said about her personality. A few sentences. 31 years of life reduced to a few typed lines. One night, she took off her boots and went to bed. Then, something happened. Maybe she heard a sound outside. Maybe someone knocked on the door. Maybe a voice called her name. Maybe she woke up and found something standing beside her bed. Whatever happened, she left without her boots. Or she was carried, or taken in some other way that left no tracks. A mile from her station, there was a cave entrance with disturbed soil. Nobody searched it. A week later, the case was closed. I do not know why I am crying. I never met Ellen Voss. I had never heard her name before last night. She disappeared years before I was born. But as I sit here holding this photograph, I feel as if I have lost someone, not a stranger, someone important, someone whose absence has followed me for my entire life, even though I did not know she existed. There is a hole in my chest. It feels old. It feels like it has always been there. I am only noticing it now because I finally found the shape of what is missing. This feeling does not belong to me, or it should not. I keep thinking about the man in the photograph. I cannot see his face clearly. The picture is too small, and he is turned toward Ellen. His features are blurred by shadow and age, but something about him feels familiar. The way he stands, the set of his shoulders, the angle of his head, the way he holds his weight slightly toward one side. It creates a strange feeling inside me. Not recognition exactly. Something close to it. It is the way a place feels familiar when you have dreamed about it but never visited. The way a voice can make you homesick, even when you do not know who is speaking. I have spent 3 hours looking at this photograph. I have held it closer to the lamp. I have used a magnifying glass. I have taken pictures of it with my phone and enlarged them until the image became a blur of black and gray squares. I still cannot see his face, but I feel like I know him. I feel like I know the way he is looking at her. There are 3 more folders in the box with Machen's name inside them. I have been avoiding those too. I realize that now. They were always near the bottom, always behind thicker files. Whenever I touched one, I chose another instead. The same thing that kept me from Ellen's file has been keeping me from his. After tonight, I do not think I can avoid them anymore. The pull is stronger now. It is no longer pointing only toward the box. It is pointing toward those 3 folders. They are sitting on my desk as I write this. I have arranged them side by side. I have not opened them yet. I am afraid that once I do, something in my life will change forever. Maybe it already has. I just wish I understood why Ellen's face makes me feel like I am mourning something I never had. I wish I knew why the man beside her feels like someone I should remember. Most of all, I wish I knew why, when I look at the photograph, I can almost hear a woman laughing. Not clearly. It is faint, like a sound coming through a wall. But every time I close my eyes, I hear it. And beneath the laughter, much farther away, I hear something else. A man's voice. He keeps saying the same name, not Ellen's. Mine, I have been recording everything. Every file. Every photograph, every tape. I am making copies and saving them in different places. I need there to be a record that cannot be stamped, hidden, or buried behind another wall. I need someone else to know these people existed. I need someone to remember Ellen Voss. Because someone worked very hard to make the world forget her. I am going to open the first Machen file when I finish writing this. I do not know what I will find. I do not know whether the pull is leading me toward the truth or toward the same thing that took Ellen. If I stop posting, you will know why. These are the buried archives.